أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وانزل علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshaa Allah, we're coming to a closure on the diseases now, and what he's going to deal with now is actually a general or comprehensive treatment plan for the diseases of the heart. So he says, وَطِبُّ أو طَبُّ أو طُبُّ, this is a thulathi, it goes all three ways. وَطَبُّ أَمْرَاضِ الْقُلُوبِ الْجَامِعُ لَهُنَّ نَهْيُ النَّفْسِ عَمَّا تَتْبَعُ. That the treatment plan that's comprehensive, al-jami'u, for the heart's diseases, is to prohibit the self from its own desires coupled with, and then he gives us وَثَغَبٌ وَالسَّهْرُ اللَّيَالِ وَالصَّمْتُ وَالْفِكْرَةُ وَهُوَ خَالِ, coupled with hunger, vigilance in the night, silence, and meditation in private. Now, he says, rahimahullah, that in order to treat the self, or the heart itself, you have to prohibit the self from what it desires. Now, there's a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يكون هواه تبعا لما جئت به. In other words, none of you truly believes until his hawa, his caprice or his desire, is in accordance with what I have brought. So in other words, the way you purify your heart, all those things are haram, the diseases that he just mentioned, so they're not in accordance with what Allah and His Messenger have given us as guidance. So Allah's Messenger ﷺ said the iman is not complete. In other words, your heart is not sound until your hawa, the desire of your heart, is in accordance with what I brought, which is huda. And the way that you do that is by prohibiting it from those very things that aren't in accordance with it until you no longer desire them. And that's the idea of وَالنَّفْسُ كَالطِّفْلِ إِنْ تَحْمِلْهُ شَبَّ عَلَى حُبِّ الرَّضَاعِ وَإِنْ تَفْتِمْهُ يَنْفَطِمِ. The nafs is like an infant. If you neglect it, it grows up loving to suckle. But if you wean it, it loses its desire. Because the child, there's people in this culture that like leche leak, they breastfeed until 4 or 5 years old. The child keeps desiring it, right? And they just keep going. But if you wean a child at 2 years, or even a year, or half a year, whatever age you wean the child, I mean, Sharia prefers that it goes to 2 years. And there's a wisdom in that. And there was actually a study done in Israel that proved, this is just a sidetrack, that proved that they did a statistical analysis of breastfed children, and children that weren't breastfed. And correlations in statistics are always the problematic aspect of it. But they found that there was an increase in the IQs by 3 points for every month of breastfeeding. That's what they found. And I mean, there's obviously a lot of variables in a study like that. But I thought it was interesting because the Prophet said in a hadith, beware of the, he said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالْحَمْقَى فَإِنَّهَا تُغَذِّي. Beware of the wet nurse who's not very intelligent, because she's nourishing the brain, right? So that, traditionally they used to look for sagacious people to hire as wet nurses and things like that. And obviously Halima, and really fascinating thing about Halima Sa'diyah, read her hadith. If you know Arabic, read her hadith. And it's one of the most sophisticated Arabic, every collection of hadith that has that hadith in it, they always have to comment on all the words she uses because they're so difficult, right? I mean, she was incredibly eloquent. Alayhi salam. She's the mother of the Messenger of Allah. Allahu Akbar. So that's what he's telling us. And that's where you get in the Quran, وَمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. The one who naha nafs عَنِ الْهَوَى, the one who fears Allah, the maqam of Allah, and then actually prevents himself from doing what it desires, right? From doing what it desires. So that is something, it's mujahada, qama'un nafs, literally suppressing the nafs desire. And this is self-discipline. Man dana nafsuhu. You have to discipline the soul. If you discipline the soul, you'll be happy. If you don't discipline the soul, you'll be miserable. And in this culture, you look at all the self-help, all the things, it's all about people who can't control themselves. And that's why Islam gives us prayer to learn how to become disciplined in our time and in our days. It gives us washing, becoming disciplined in cleanliness and ritual. It gives us Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, fasting, which is all about learning discipline, of disciplining the tongue, disciplining the stomach, the genitals, all of the things that Islam brings. It really relates to learning how to discipline yourself. Because I guarantee you, if you don't have discipline about time, you won't pray on time. You have to have in order to pray on time, you have to, especially in this culture, because you don't have the adhan, and you don't have mosques everywhere. So you really have to keep that in mind. It's actually, it's so easy. Whenever you go to the Muslim world from here, it's amazing how easy it is to pray. Incredible. This is a huge difference. Whereas here, there's a vigilance you have to maintain. But that's still a disciplining aspect. So you have to discipline the soul, the tongue, learning how to say stop. Learning how to, when you desire to backbite, catching yourself. I don't want to do this. You have to learn to do that. It's a process. And if you do it enough, it'll get to the point where you're not doing it anymore. And that's where the hawa becomes in accordance with what the messenger brought. تَبَعَنِّ مَا جِئْتُ بِهِ. So that's what he's telling us. Now, then he gives us the way to do that. Right? How do you, what are the key things that the soul wants? Right? Saghab, hunger. In other words, the stomach, kasra shahwatain. The stomach, by getting the stomach, you get the genitals as well. The stomach is the key impulse of people. In other words, if you can learn to control your food, and this is why one of the Salaf, according to Imam al-Qashayri, said, for me to raise my hand from the plate while I'm still hungry is better than spending the whole night in prayer. Because if he can discipline that aspect of himself, everything else will be easy. Because it's very, and you watch people who don't get food, right, have big food naps, right, food naps. There's some people who have really big food naps. If they don't get food, they start getting angry, right, they'll blame it on hypoglycemia. No, there are people that do really have that. So I'm not going to make fun of that. But there's people, they get really angry that food's not on time. You see them at restaurants, waitresses and waiters have to deal with that all the time. Where's my food? There's 500 other people in the place, and we do have a number, and you came in to us, and, just take time. People don't have that time. They have to wait. That's why fast food, right? Go to the box, it's fast food. That's America. Quick, I need it now. Give me my food. And this is the infantile nuts. Because the baby, the first thing it does, what's it want? Food. The milk starts flowing when they hear the baby scream, right? So the baby is screaming because it wants food. And when it gets the breast, it just goes into a state, complete relaxation, and the world is wonderful. And so that is the infantile nuts, right? And this is what you have to, and I have to, all of us have to discipline in our souls the idea of being able to do without food, and not getting grumpy about it, and not worrying about it, and recognizing you're not going to die from missing a meal. You will not die from missing a meal. People say, I'm starving. You're not starving. Really, you're not starving. I mean, there are people that are starving, they're dropping dead. Really, there's people all over the place that are actually, they are hungry. And that's part of what, saghab, and that's why the early shuyukh all focused on hunger more than anything else. This does not mean become anorexic. All they're saying is learn to discipline yourself, right? you really, if you eat, 2 meals a day is enough. I guarantee you. 2 meals a day is enough. You don't need more than 2 meals a day. Morning, late afternoon. That's all you need. If you want morning, afternoon, then something light at night. But 3 meals a day. And one of the amazing things there's a man who, he was, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. He was from Yemen. He was actually a Hanifi, from Bani Hanifa. And his name, I can't recall it right now. He came to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet gave him, it's in Al-Bukhari, the Prophet gave him he gave him a bowl of milk, and he drank it, and the Prophet said, would you like more? He said, yes. And he kept giving to him 7 bowls. He drank all 7. And then, after that, he became Muslim the next day. And he came back, and he could only drink 1. And all the Sahaba were amazed, because the night before they saw him drink 7, and that night they only saw him drink 1. And he was tough, desert Arab. And they asked the Prophet, what's the wisdom in that? And he said, al-mu'minu ya'kuru, al-kafiru ya'kuru min sab'ati am'a. That the kafir eats from 7 intestines. وَالْمُؤْمِنُ يَأْكُلُ مِنْ مَعْيٍ وَاحِدٍ. But the mu'min only eats from 1. So Iman actually will decrease your appetite. Now obviously I don't want people to get worried about. So hunger is a big one. Now obviously, in that early community another interesting to point out something really important. People eat much more now, common people, than they've ever eaten at any other time in history. Alright, there is a massive surplus of food. Traditionally they were not able to produce food, and a lot of this is agro business. People are eating meat now that never used to eat meat. You ask any people who are from immigrant countries, even people from this country, right? Because African American people who are from the South, know about what they call soul food, which was all the leftovers of hogs, because people were very poor and they couldn't afford to buy meat, even pig meat, right? And the same is true in most Muslim countries. You ask your grandparents if they're still alive, how often did you eat meat? And if they weren't from a wealthy family, they probably ate meat maybe once a week if they were city dwellers. If they lived outside of the cities in villages and things like that, even less than that. And I've asked many, like Yemenis and things, some of them, they would eat meat only on their Eids, right? So meat consumption has increased massively, and everything else. And even people in this country who are older will remember that, there's people in this country that can remember that you just didn't have snacks all the time. Children didn't have access to all that stuff. You ate, at times that you were supposed to eat, and other times off limits. And there weren't convenience stores everywhere where you can go and buy a Coke and buy. So this is all part of the modern culture, which is making people more like animals. Because if you notice about the animal, it grazes. And Allah mentions that these people are like an'am. They just graze. In fact, they put them in some of these co-op type stores, no grazing. They have a little sign there where they have open things with bulk food, no grazing, And so people have become grazers. The sociologists call them food contacts, and they say like average American has 20 food contacts a day. In other words, during the day they're going to have food 20 different times throughout the day. And there's even people that recommend that now, having these smaller meals throughout the day as a healthier way. If you go into all the traditional cultures, they have meals specific times, and they don't eat between meals. One, there's no refrigeration, things like that. And so they're much more disciplined about those things. You take a Bedouin from Mauritania, they can go days without food, very little food, because they're disciplined in that area. People here, it's interesting, in the American Army, they have now hot food. All you have to do is pour water on it, and it's got these things with chemical reactions, and it becomes hot. And then not only that, they have, for Indian, like Sikhs and things, they have Indian curries in the Army now, right? And for the different ethnic groups, you can request different sea rations and things like that. And this is all completely, it destroyed their army. There's no fortitude there, there's nothing. They're just going to be complete. And then the other thing about the American Army now is they need, for every one man in field, they need 17 men to back them up. Right? 17 to maintain. And they plan by the year 2003 or something to have every American soldier to have a personal PC. A personal PC. And it's just, it's unbelievable, but that's a whole other thing. Anyway, the point is about food. Is that if you have Muslims, fasting is discipline. The Muslims can deal with times when there won't be food just from the fasting. They're used to not eating during those periods. Now, one of the things about Ramadan that's been ruined is that Muslims eat more in Ramadan than they eat in other times. And there are Muslims that will spend the whole night eating, because I've seen it. I'm not joking. There are Muslims that will literally, the night becomes not for ibadah, for tadarru' ila Allah, it just becomes eating. And huge feasts and things like that and all these things. Traditionally, they, if you invite people over, you want to feed them and things like that. We've gotten into these walima, extravagant things, and so a person can't even invite somebody over unless they make this massive thing. And all these things is one of the, things that the Prophet ﷺ warned us against, doing all these things. And he used to feed his guests sometimes with dates and water, right? I mean, you don't have to do that, but you shouldn't expect things when you go to people's houses. Don't expect this extravagant thing. Be content with what they bring, and don't see it as an insult or anything like that, because there's people that don't want to be extravagant. And if they're misers, have a good opinion of them anyway. But maybe they want to follow the sunnah. It's always good to have a good opinion of people. So, in any case, you don't lose. So hunger, there's a lot about that. But in terms of, for us, what I would recommend personally is, if you do have a problem with food, then begin to discipline yourself. Begin to lower the portions. Preferably eat together. Because if you eat alone, you'll eat more. There's less barakah. The more people at the plate, the more barakah descends, the less food you need. And people who know that. If you eat from... And one of the things about Sheikh Khatri, when he went back to Mauritania, somebody asked him what was one of the strangest things he saw, or tell him about the strange thing. He said one of the things that shocked him the most was they all eat from separate plates. That just completely shocked. And when he was telling these people that, they were all saying, geez, like they couldn't understand it. Like, how would they do that? Well, he said everybody takes their own portion and goes through, and they were like, they just couldn't imagine it. It just seemed so bizarre to them to do that. And he said, Marrat fadahtu nafsi. He said, so many times I made a fool out of myself because they put a big plate there and I'd start eating from it. And then they'd all come up with their small plates. So really, eat together. It's good for the family to eat together and things like that. There's barakah in it. You eat with the people, there's more barakah. And then also, just to control yourself, to eat, preferably 2 meals. If you can't do that, then just don't eat real heavy meals. Just eat enough. And also, the better the food is, the less you'll need of it. So, the food that these people eat, part of the reason why they eat so much, and I guarantee you, if you go to a restaurant in this country, they put down in front of one person what 10 people would eat in West Africa. I guarantee you. 10 people. And most of them clean their plates. So, the portions of food, if it's good food, you'll need less. If it's bad food, you're going to eat more and it won't. And by good food and bad food, I mean food that's nutritious, good grain food, vegetables, things like that. If you're eating all these empty type foods, fast food type thing, I wouldn't even eat in a fast food restaurant. I wouldn't even go near one of those places. Even if it's a McFish burger or whatever it is, I wouldn't. And they say it's more nutritious to eat the stuff that it came in. Like the cardboard box. Throw the hamburger out. You see? There's more roughage in it.